Hello, everybody, and welcome to The View from the Top. We are live. We've got an amazing people coming from all over the world. I see Emily from France. We've got Ray coming from Canada. We've got people coming over from all over the world. We are talking about such a huge topic today. We are talking about Futureshock, global pay in 2023, what the world is going to look like next year after all the awful things that have been happening over the last year or so. So it's an amazing topic that we're covering. Now, you know how it works. Join the conversation. Tell us you're there. Write in the comments box. We want to know who you are, where you are. Now, I know a lot of you are going to be out at ERC today, so maybe catching up on the show later. But if you are at ERC and you've decided to catch us early, then let us know how it's going. If you couldn't get to ERC, then we'll be reporting back on that too next week. But we've got, as I said, an amazing show for you today. And then next week we've got a great show for you as well, because next week we're going to be talking about the integrated relocation model. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, at the moment, you've got a choice. You either go for a really, really fancy tech solution, or you go for a fairly white glove RMC solution. But can you marry the two? Can you have a white hot tech solution with a white glove RMC solution? We think the answer is yes, and we're going to show you all about that next week on the show. So the other thing, I've mentioned ERC already, but you can, of course, get your codes from ERC. So if you want to get your CPE codes, then those are available from ERC. So you can get your from ERC, you get your GMS and your CRP codes, or via our good friends at Rocket Mortgage, you can get your HRCI and your SHRM codes. So if you need CPD codes, then we can offer them to you as well. How exciting is that? Now, there's so much news to go. I've got a really special guest, and we've got a really special competition for you in a moment. But before we do that, let me share with you some of the breaking news from what's been going on around our industry over the last 7 days. So here's our breaking news. And then after that, I'm going to bring on our very special guest. So there's our breaking news, and we've got a special guest with us today. We've got Alex from Global Mobility Executive, because we are in conference season. So this week, and I know some of you are there, we've got Worldwide ERC, and they're obviously having an amazing time. Next week, we've got the Forum for Expatriate Management in London. And then the week after that, we've got Global Mobility Executive. And Alex, you are Mr. GME. So tell us all about GME. And I know we've got a really special competition that we're going to launch right here, right now. So Alex, tell us a little bit about GME.
Yeah, thank you, Brian, and really appreciate being invited on to the show. It provides such a fantastic weekly resource for the community. So thanks for the invite. But yeah, so GME Live on November the 10th. So we're bringing together over 100 leading enterprise, global mobility and HR practitioners for a series of keynote presentations, fireside chats, interactive breakout discussions, and really enabling our global audience of global mobility and HR leaders to share their challenges, benchmark and explore strategies on how they can innovate and adapt with the current evolving business landscape. We've got a fantastic world-class speaker roster with leaders from companies such as Twitter, Volkswagen, Flutter Entertainment, Getir, Cognizant, and many more. And we've created a really awesome agenda based on some of the challenges that have been outlined by our global mobility and HR leader community over the past few months. Everything from remote work to business travel to the war on talent and technology. And it's also great to have Benevo being one of our strategic partners and having Beth speaking at the event as well. But as you said, we've got, sorry, get on, Brian.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's get into the competition, because as I understand it, what you've offered, we've been talking about that, is we are offering a free trip to London. So you're paying for the flight. Yeah, I'm not paying anything here. You guys are very kindly paying for the flights and for 2 nights accommodation for anybody who wants to attend the conference on the 10th of November. And they've got to be a corporate. That's right, isn't it? I'm afraid.
Correct. Yes. So in terms of, you need to be obviously available on the 9th and 10th of November from an in-house corporate mobility or HR role. Yes, and all you need to do is in the comments section. Now I know a few have already done it, but put hashtag GME Live EMEA, and yes, we will be picking a winner, and they will be flown to London, and we'll be putting them in the hotel for 2 nights, and they'll of course also be joining us for the GME Live event as well for the full day. Okay, so all you need to do, and I can see lots of them coming in, is just write in hashtag GME Live EMEA or anything else that makes it quite clear to us that you want to come and be in the draw. So just say yes, please, or whatever. But GME Live, hashtag GME Live EMEA is what you want to say. And then, but you've got to stay to the end of the show. And at the end of the show, so it'll be in about 45 minutes time or something, we'll get Alex back. He will have you got a hat there, Alex? I've got my hat ready.
He's got his he's got a real hat. And he'll take those names, and he'll put them in the hat, and we'll do a live draw on air. And somebody, how exciting is this? Someone is going to win a free trip to London. 2 nights accommodation, and you get to attend the show, and you get to meet Alex. And me.
That's worth the trip by itself.
Julia's going to be there too, isn't she? So
exactly, yes, yeah.
Okay, so good luck, everybody. I can see lots of people are taking part. So we're going to say goodbye to you now, Alex. We'll see you at the end of the show. And we're now going to bring on Julia for our immigration update.
Hi, Brian.
Yeah. Hi, how are you doing?
Very well. That's really exciting about the raffle. I'm on the advisory board of GME, and I'll be there as well on the 10th. So, well, good luck to everyone.
Cool. Tell me, Julia, whereabouts are you today?
I'm in Dubai today.
Cool. As ever, it's a different country, I think, every week with you. And what are you going to be talking to us about today?
So I just wanted to spend just literally 4 minutes talking about immigration strategic policies that everyone should be thinking about. And I just wanted to give a bit of a shout out to Raj Naik for helping me prepare for this. But there's a couple of things that I think people are actually forgetting, and we're seeing that these are causing problems. So I just wanted to raise them today. The first is that because in many countries now there isn't any COVID restrictions, business travelers are actually relaxing, and they're not actually checking up before they travel whether or not there are any COVID restrictions. Most business travelers are assuming that there aren't, and we've had a few that senior employees particular who've actually not been allowed to board a flight or been turned away worst at the border when they've reached a country because they just weren't prepared. So everybody seems to be well aware that there's problems in China and Hong Kong, and they're quite cautious because that's in the public domain. But there are countries across Africa, and there's other countries in Asia, sort of particularly, for example, Qatar, where you still need a PCR within 48 hours or an antigen test within 24 hours. You still need proof of your vaccine in a very prescribed manner. So it's really a good idea to just make sure that you have a policy around this and you keep checking. The second thing I wanted to say is that we've got to really be careful now about business travelers. And also, just before we go to business travelers, the remote working policies. Because during the COVID period, people were, either stayed where they were or they went to one country and there wasn't quite a lot of cross-border movement. But now it's really important, as companies' remote working policies of tightening up, that you do sort of regularize all of the immigration permission of position of all those people. Again, we're finding that companies are now finding people who are still remotely working, and they're falling outside the policies. Now, in Europe, this is becoming quite a difficult thing for business travel. And I keep mentioning that you must keep looking at British citizens. They're not familiar with the fact that they have to get any permission to travel in Europe. They are only allowed 90 and 180 days in the Schengen area. Some will be caught out by the posted worker notification if they're in some countries for more than 30 days, even if they're not working. There's social security implications, tax implications, and things that you should be really aware of as well is that a lot of countries now are actually being quite hostile to Russian citizens. And we've had a number of applications refused, particularly moving Russians into Poland, where they've been refused for security reasons. So any project that you've got where you're moving people, you've got to think of multi-jurisdictional options. And then other things that really are not sort of top of your mind. But in Germany, for example, there's a church tax, so that when you get permission and you're landed in Germany, you have to register in the town hall and you have to register to pay church tax. You can opt out, but that can have an implication on the school's choices for your children. In Italy, you have to do a police registration. And we've had cases recently where there's been an audit and the individual isn't there because they've been traveling. And again, that's caused problems. And in Poland, we've had a couple of companies that have had audits, random audits. And one of the requirements of the audit is to prove that your new assignee has had health and safety training. And again, that's something that can catch you out. So I'm just sort of raising these as the point to say, holistically, it's really important that you look at having a sort of global immigration policy and that you just catch all these small things, because although they sound small in themselves, they can have a huge impact. And also if it's a senior person who really needs to travel, it can cause a lot of noise in your organization. So that's all I wanted to say this week.
Wow, that's an amazing amount of information you just put out there in such a short time. That was such an important 2 or 3 or 4 minutes, whatever it was. A lot of really important information. Julia, as ever, many, many thanks. Thank you for your help. We'll see you at the back end of the show and,
yes.
And again next week. So take care, Julia. And now we're going to move on to tax. So we always like to have a little tax update. So we've got Pat Jurgens with us. So everybody, you know how it works. For Julia and for Pat, hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button. Let's say ta-ra for now to Julia and a big hello to Pat Jurgens. Hey, Pat, how are you doing? Good to see
Brian.
you. It's always good to see you, my friend. Every Wednesday we get to see you. You give us our tax update. So where are we talking about today? What's today's tax update?
We're talking about the war between Russia and the Ukraine, and it's certainly been interesting for me to see how tax policy evolves in the face of conflict. And what better example than the Ukraine-Russian war? So first off, Russia terminated the tax treaty with Ukraine, so there's no possibility of using the treaty for double tax relief. And domestically in both countries, most of the tax changes are looking to provide relief for either exemptions from tax or compliance waivers for affected taxpayers, mostly going in and serving in the military. So they've also done some interesting tax consequences for those not contributing, quote unquote, properly to the war effort. So contributing in the opposite side, perhaps. So here's a few examples. In the Ukraine, recent tax changes have been mostly regulations. They do have a tax proposal for 2023 to reduce the tax rate. That would go from 18% to 10%. And, you know, they're looking to make those changes effective for as of next year. But who knows to what extent that enactment will happen. But it certainly is a lot different than the tax proposal that we were looking at back in March. I don't know if you remember the show in March. We talked about this a bit. So in the interim, you know, the state tax service with Ukraine is issuing regulations and coming up with ways to provide relief. They're allowing entrepreneurs to deduct the value of donations, goods and services and money to the armed forces in Ukraine. And a similar rule making tax-free the receipt of charitable assistance received by families of combatants that either died or were injured in the war. So one of the bigger problems that the state tax service has is trying to minimize double taxation for refugees who've left Ukraine and now reside in other European countries. And they're asking for coordination with the EU member states to look for ways to either overlook the fact that they are in country for more than 183 days and may be treated as resident under domestic law. They're looking for ways to maintain the tax residency status in the Ukraine. And just to try to twist the knife a bit, if you will, the Ukrainian government has also proposed raising taxes for companies either of in Russia or doing business in Russia. Just again, trying to switch.
These are Ukrainian headquartered companies who are doing business in Russia.
Yes, exactly. So they'll be hit with a higher rate of tax.
Yeah.
And in Russia, similar things have happened. Early on in the conflict, the central bank placed restrictions on foreign currency transfers and requiring foreign companies doing business in Russia to disclose who are the true beneficial owners. And just this month, they proposed exemptions from income tax and Social Security for employers making payments to employees that have been mobilized, i.e. drafted into the armed forces. And that exemption is provided up to 200,000 rubles a year. The exemption will apply to military employees themselves and also to any members of the family that have been employees have been mobilized. So those types of things, I think, will be helpful for those folks who have been called up on the draft. They've also provided some relief on debt forgiveness. In other words, if you are an affected individual that has had debt relief, it's not going to be considered taxable income. And, you know, they've had to also provide some incentives. They're looking for companies to develop technology equipment locally because, you know, due to the sanctions, they aren't able to import some of these materials. So companies that are starting to develop capabilities locally are enjoying a zero corporate tax rate for 7 years and also reduced contributions to Social Security. And again, that little twist, they also are enforcing a new non-resident rule. Employees working for Russian companies that don't reside or work in Russia, but they just work for Russian companies, they will be subjected to a non-resident Russian tax of 30%. And they point out, well, okay, that won't be a consequence to the extent that you have a tax treaty with Russia and can claim treaty relief. You won't have to pay that non-resident tax of 30%. Well, which country did they just terminate the treaty with? Ukraine. So clearly they're, again, not viewing those folks in a favorable light.
Okay. So Pat, that's an amazing insight. And I mean, obviously it's just desperate what's going on there. But, you know, yeah, there's always a tax angle to everything, and just an amazing amount of information you provided there. Pat, so many thanks for your help. We're now going to bring on our producer Tally to give us a little bit of an update about what's going on elsewhere. So we're going to bring on Tally. So everybody, you know how it works. I've said it before. I've said it 100 times. We're going to say goodbye to Pat. We're going to say hello to Tally. So please hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's move on to the next section of our show. And I should say before we start it, of course, one of the things we're going to be talking about is our top innovators. If you haven't voted already, if you haven't nominated to be one of your top innovators, here's the introductory video. Hey, Tally.
Brian,
Good
hey.
to see you. Okay, so
I
tell us.
already shared the nomination link, and thank you, Nicola, for voting. I saw your vote. It's good. And what I want to quickly say today is first to all of our viewers in Vegas, and I see that we do have a few of them here. Have fun, and don't forget to stop by our kiosk and share your impressions from the event, because next week we're going to announce who's going to join us here live in the show. And you still have time tomorrow to register to hear our breakout session and with our team there in ERC. But if you're like us and you didn't get to Vegas and you are going to be at FEM in London, you can meet our UK team there. And also, together with Alex, I want to invite you on the 10th of November to meet again Beth and Brian. You're going to be there too. I'm
really looking forward to both those events, both the FEM event and the Global Mobility Executive event. And yeah, we're really looking forward to seeing as many of you as possible at those events and meeting you all live.
Great. So I think now the video guys are waiting in the back room. So
okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to bring on our special guests. We are so excited. We have Judy Canavan and Joe Pancamo from BDO, and we're going to be talking about Futureshock, global pay trends in 2023. So everybody, you know how it works. I've told you before, I'll tell you again. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's say a big hello to Joe and to Judy. Joe. Hey, Judy. Good to see you both. So we're going to be talking about Futureshock, but before we do, let's just find out a bit about you guys. I'm guessing everybody knows who BDO are, one of the great professional services firms in the world. But Judy, tell us a bit about yourself, because you've got an academic background as well, haven't you?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me on. I'm managing director here in Philadelphia. Everybody probably figured out that. And I have been with BDO for 4 years and in this space for 30 years. And part of that was actually acting as an adjunct professor and teaching compensation principles to a graduate degree program at University of Southern California, Bovard College. Yep.
Cool. Okay. So you've done a lot of teaching. You're teaching compensation to master's students. So
yes,
you know what you're talking about. We've got ourselves a real comp expert on the show. And Joe, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. We are behind the stage jamming out there, so we're gonna have to get the soundtrack. I'm a partner in BDO's Global Employer Services Group, so my entire career has been focused on helping organizations with the HR and mobility issues when you're dealing with their remote workforce, but very specifically dealing with mobility, equity, and payroll. I'm based out of Dallas. Been with the firm for over 12 years. Legacy Big Four background. Happy to be here.
Cool. Okay. So we're going to talk about global pay, Futureshock, global pay in 2023. And I want to get the audience involved. By the way, in the audience, if you haven't if you hadn't written GME Live EMEA yet, and loads of you have, and you want to win a free trip to London, then don't forget to write GME Live EMEA in the comments box. And the deal is you've got to be available to come over to the conference. So we want you on the 9th and 10th of November, and GME will fly you economy class. I know somebody asked it in there. We're not setting the first class. It's economy class, and you'll get 2 nights accommodation as well for the conference in London. So do write. But anyway, it's been a hell of a few years. We've had the pandemic, we've had war in Russia and Ukraine, we've had a cost of living crisis. It looks like we're heading into recession in 23. It's almost like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse out there. It's all doom. But the question I want to ask, and I want to ask the audience as well as our experts on the panel, is what is the greatest challenge facing global mobility next year? And these are the choices that I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you those 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Is it the cost of living crisis? Is it managing remote work? Is it the conflict in Ukraine? Or is it recession? So let's start with you, Judy. What would you say is the greatest challenge facing global mobility? And in the audience, write in the comments box and tell us what you think too.
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard to sort of break out recession from cost of living. So both of those are going to go together as being a big issue for the individuals, and certainly managing remote work for the companies, I think is going to be, so those 3. And of course, if you're in Ukraine or Russia, that's going to be a big issue or if you have dealings with companies there.
Okay. And Joe, from your perspective, what are you seeing as the greatest challenge facing our industry? I mean, not the world, our industry next year.
Look, I got to say, I'm biased, right? So for me, it's remote work. The economic conditions, they ebb and flow. We've been here before, but remote work is new in a lot of different ways.
Right. Okay. And let's see what the audience said, because I think we've got that from the audience. And what we're seeing from the audience is that 32% said the cost of living crisis is the major concern. 31%, so about the same, said managing remote work. The conflict of Ukraine, only 8%, and then 29% said recession. So if you like, the big 3 that seem to be affecting our industry, according to our poll, was the cost of living crisis, managing remote work, and and recession. And clearly there's a link between all those. But let's start with this whole question of remote work. Judy, just start off to what is remote work? Let's start defining our term.
That's a great question, because I think everybody lumps a bunch of different concepts into the term remote work. And I find that for setting policy and thinking about it, there's at least two big buckets. One is actually working from home, where you are pretty close to your office, you're expected to come in from time to time, versus remote work, where you were literally hired or got the opportunity to work someplace that maybe you can't get into the office easily. You could be in a different time zone even, and you're expected to have an office set up there, and your company probably doesn't have an office set up for you on a permanent basis in any of their places. So I think that those definitions really help you define policies around that.
Okay. Someone wrote here, got Nicola, let's pull that quote up. Nicola wrote, "Apocalypse is downplaying it a bit. I think it is worse. Apocalypse would feel like a fireworks show by comparison." Oh my God. It really has been the most awful couple of years. And sadly, I'm not sure it's looking like it's getting better anytime soon, but there's a thought. Okay, but anyway, we're talking about the difference between remote work and working from home, and actually a question has come up from Mena. Maybe Joe, we'll take that question with you. What is the difference between remote work and a virtual assignment?
Yeah, no, happy to dive in. I know this is an area that Judy likes to play in as well, but certainly when we think about the concept remote work versus virtual assignment, we can really pull back the curtain and say, let's take remote work one step further. Are you simply working from home within the city? How easily can you get back into the office? Or is it remote? It's not easy to get back into the office. So I always use that as kind of like an underlying detail. What do the surrounding parameters and aspects look like? But I like the new term too, virtual assignment, and that can mean a few different things too. But Judy, I think you tend to look at this and say, where from a proximity perspective are you actually?
Yeah, or where I was actually hired by BDO as a remote worker, even though I could technically get into the Philadelphia or Melbourne office. So so the remote work piece assumed that I could set up an appropriate office space. BDO provided computers, etc., because I was hired that way. There wasn't space in an office for me. And then I think the work from home, this is always tricky because a lot of people ended up working from home, not necessarily planning for it, not necessarily having a great setup, but needing to set up. And now companies are like, well, we might need you to come into the office, back into the office, which makes it tricky.
Yeah, because you also worked remotely. I know you said you were a professor at University of California. Yeah. And when you did that, you were then still based in Philadelphia. So you weren't flying into to teach classes. That was all remote.
And neither were the students. That was a totally remote teaching experience. It was great. It was really interesting. They set up a virtual classroom. We did virtual chats and had virtual coaching sessions, virtual office hours. Everything was virtual.
So do we think that remote then is going to be the exception or the rule going forward? I mean, is it going to be, a company's going to turn around and say, yeah, we don't mind you working from home occasionally, a little bit of hybrid working, that's fine. But actually, if you want to work remotely, and remote in our definitions, we talked about remote in our definition is basically someone pretty much who can't get to the office. So they can't get to the office regularly. Is that going to be the exception or the rule, remote working?
That's a great question.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to go away. We are seeing signs that it's like with job postings where there are fewer and fewer of them offering remote work sort of out of the gate. I have a lot of clients dealing with this, and they do have situations where people just can't be productive at home for whatever reason, and some people are more productive at home. So it's an individual case-by-case situation, but they've had to call them back to the office and say, and usually the employees in this situation understand it and actually want to be back in the office. And then for remote work, one of the dilemmas is persuading new employees, like if you're hiring people, persuading them to move. And so if you have specific talent that you really need, and this really falls under, the technical talent, and they've got their kids in school, they've got their community, they're like, okay, I'm excited about this job opportunity, but I don't want to move. So then it's a negotiation between the company and the employee or the potential employee on what they're going to do. And so on one hand, it's opened up the talent pool, the remote work, but on the other hand, it's also made it easier for people to leave their companies and go someplace else because they can work remotely. So there's sort of two edges to that sword.
Yeah, this is definitely one of these crystal ball questions. And my viewpoint on it has always been it's very much timing and industry specific as well. There's cultures across different organizations too. And to Judy's point, in some instances, you may have to have people in the office to be productive, team meetings, what have you. Otherwise, you get into this flex schedule arrangement too that has proven to work out really well.
And let's take Trisha's comment. Let's just pull that back up on the screen. Trish, I think is from memory is with Westinghouse. Correct me if I'm wrong, Trish. She says remote work is now incorporated into recruiting strategies. Mm-hmm. It's here to stay. Now, I mean, I'm going to challenge you on that, Trish. I mean, I think it might be with some companies, but I think there are other companies who are fighting back. And it's almost like there's a power struggle going on between, if you like, the talent and the employer. And, and some employers are saying absolutely yes, and others are not so sure. I think it was the CEO of JP Morgan or Morgan Stanley, one of those said, basically said, if you don't want to work in New York and you want to work in, say, Colorado, fine, but expect to get paid Colorado salaries. So, it raises this whole question. And there's other companies, like Airbnb, who seem to be quite happy for people to work remotely. And then companies going the other way, like Tesla, who are saying, no, you've got to be in the office. And then you get, of course, a company like Twitter that is sort of saying you can work remotely, but then who knows what will happen if they get taken over with a company, someone who said exactly who knows what's going to happen there.
I really get into this is why Brian's like, it's really industry focused. And I'll put it to you this way, there's no right answer, right?
Yeah.
And I thought you brought up a really good point too about culture. So, but after you've figured out pay and gotten the pay or the right level, the two other reasons that people stay, it's good for attraction if you can get the word out, but it's a big retention piece is culture and career ladders. And it's really a struggle. Companies are really struggling and trying to be very innovative in terms of having a good culture with work at home. A lot of my clients are saying, hey, come in for 2 days, core days. So everybody's there together. Have a flex day, and you can come in whatever day. And then that gives you 2 days work from home. That seems to be a predominant theme. And one of the things, everybody's talking about, flowers and butterflies with working from home, but we're also seeing a sort of another side of it, especially for the younger generation who have just maybe
I'm going to stop you there. What's flowers and butterflies? That's a new one on me.
It's just all happy, happy, joy. It's all wonderful. There's no problems with working from home. And yet we've got, you're really looking at some of the, recent college graduates, especially if they're coming out for hard jobs in the financial services industries, and they're working 80, 100 hours a week and basically, getting out of bed, going to a, laptop on a card table in a, apartment someplace, working, and then they have no camaraderie, no peers to bounce ideas off, to, let out some steam with, and they're really they're not happy. They're not liking it.
Okay. And we've had a great comment coming in from Karen Hale. Let's just pull that up onto screen. Karen, who's with Unity Technologies, has said, we've had several employees rescind their permanent remote work requests once they're informed of the updated compensation offered for the new geographic location. So, I mean, that's a subject. I mean, Judy, you said, I think a bit earlier in the conversation, said, once we deal with the question of pay, and then you moved on to the question of culture, but that's easier said than done. So, let's just go back to this question of pay. Okay. how do you pay remote workers? I mean, do you go into paying people based on their head office location, their work location, or their geographic location? So let's just take that banker who has decided they don't want to be in Manhattan. They want to do their job from Salt Lake City or Boise or somewhere that's lower cost. And they're doing that. How do you pay them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, and that's where it's really nice to define, for companies to define two separate policies of work from home and remote work. Because if somebody's on a work from home policy, you know, we're assuming they're getting back into the office, and they may not be able to go work in Colorado. That may just be impractical, point blank. So you just sort of stop it in its tracks. Now, if you have either they're a special type of talent and you want to keep them, and so you're willing to work out an arrangement for them to be in Colorado, or if you're trying to hire somebody that's in another location, then you have to think about, well, how are we going to pay them? And that's a great question. So for instance, if you hire them in Kentucky and maybe paid Kentucky rates, okay, fair enough. They probably were, they were looking around that looked good. But let's say their spouse moves to Stamford, Connecticut, and they need to move with them. What's the company do then? It wasn't the company's decision to move them. So it's a very, very interesting dilemma. And yeah, so I'm seeing do people want New York City salaries while they live in a suburb in New Jersey? So no, New Jersey isn't exactly inexpensive. Just going to say that. But usually they do a geographic differential for the greater New York area. But they used to have people that would commute from, let's say, Pennsylvania into New York. So but so then you take the remote workers, and then it's really about setting up a policy. And if you have offices around the country, you might tag them to that office. If it's a one-off situation, you're going to have to think about it for them and what they represent in terms of a talent need. The other piece is to look at your total rewards strategy and look at all the other rewards that you're providing them to see, well, how critical is the comp relative and the base salary versus the bonus versus the healthcare and medical and life and retirement plans. So in some cases, some organizations have a fair amount of comp in those pieces. So one of the things we recommend is tell your employees how much of their pay that is, so that they understand what a big chunk that represents versus their base salaries.
So Judy, it's an interesting point because a lot has changed, right? But can't we always just go back to the baseline of what's the business case? Is this a business case scenario, or is this a voluntary move?
Exactly.
Because I think the same thing about some of these remote nomads, and they're going to travel and they're going to do a couple of months here, a couple of months there. Well, are we going to continuously reevaluate their compensation? It almost seems like you can get to the point of defining a policy around this. We're going to allow this, but it's going to be for a certain period of time, and it's back to your home compensation. Mm-hmm. And there are other aspects that we need to measure to make sure that we're getting the productivity that we need.
Yes.
Do you think there's a difference between, if you like, VIPs in some way where the rules get bent and the rest of us where they might turn around and say sorry, no? I mean, do you think there's going to be a little bit of inconsistency in pay structures, or do you think companies are going to be quite rigorous on it?
That's a really good question. So let's just pretend let's just take a software developer. And let's say you have one software developer that's working in the office, one that's working from home, and one that's working remotely. How do you have fair and equitable pay structure and policies for those three different scenarios? And it's really important that you do. And they need to be written down and agreed to.
Because it might not be one of each. It may well be 50 or 100 or 1,000 of each, depending on the size of your company.
Yes.
So exactly. Brian, I see Karen's comment, and I think that's ringing true more and more these days.
Let's just take that. Yeah. She says, the labor market was so hot over the last couple of years that the employees could basically dictate their own employment terms and work location. As the labor market slows, it shifts more of the power on how and where employees work back to the employers. or at least makes it more balanced between the employees and the employers. Yeah, in other words, the power balance is maybe shifting a little bit.
We see a swing in the pendulum, especially when, you know, we're doing cost projections, if you will, and we're analyzing the entire cost of an assignment. This is going through multiple iterations, and it's, let's see what things look like, because things look a little bit different today than they did 6 months ago.
Okay. And one area I want to just discuss with Joe, if I may, is we've talked about remote pay and how difficult it is, but there's also tax aspects that can be tricky, especially, I suppose, when you come around to equity compensation. And just generally, I mean, tell us a bit about the tax implications of if people are working remotely or working from anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, look, as if things weren't complex enough, you layer in this one very specific form of compensation, equity compensation, and you look at an individual's travel calendar. So compare that to a performance period or a vesting period, and you get back to some of these digital nomads or business travelers, or even back to the formal assignments. Every country that they've traveled to, you know, one form or another, would prefer a piece of the cut, right? So if we're sourcing income out based on where these individuals have worked or lived, it's a big task on in-house equity admins to really get the cut right. You know, we're sourcing out income, we're doing our payroll obligations, we have regulatory filing obligations. So there's a lot to consider, and it drives even more the point than before that, do you really know where your people are? You know, this concept of tracking your workforce, because there's so much from an obligation perspective that you have to consider. And the equity
you know where your employees are, but actually it's even do they know where they are? Because I mean, it goes back to the question, I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, it goes back to the question of what is a day? Yeah. You know, if somebody flies in somewhere and they're there for a few hours and they fly out, where was that day? I mean, is it where they were at midnight? Is it the number of hours they were? I mean, how do you determine where they were? I appreciate that could be a whole session of itself, but give us a couple of highlights on, you know, on what is a day.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, you're right. It is complicated, and every country could have their own measurement. From a U.S. perspective, a couple hours is a work day. So if we're looking at sourcing of income, we always say, well, were you working? You know, well, I checked in or I had a meeting. That's a work day. And then we start to dive into that. Now you get this element of practicality and technicality, right? Who's counting every minute of their day in that sense. But you look at what a work day is, and that could be different from one location to the next.
Okay, I'm going to move on to a different subject, completely different subject. We talked about remote work, but one of the other horsemen of the apocalypse we were dealing with earlier as we studied was this whole question of the conflict of the cost of living crisis. So maybe starting with you, Judy, inflation. We're going into a time when we've got inflation. I think it's 8.2, 8.3% in the US. I think it's 10.1% in the UK. I don't know what other countries are, but you know, a lot of countries are up there now in either double digit or close to double digit inflation. How is that going to impact us all in terms of pay next year and beyond?
Yeah, that's a great question and a very difficult crystal ball kind of thing, because pay increases are tied to inflation. I mean, they've tracked with inflation. However, for like the last couple of decades, inflation's been around 2% in the US, merit budgets have been around 3%. So we've actually outpaced inflation. And we looked back to 1979, sort of right when you're coming out of that whole stagflationary period, and looked at inflation versus merit increases, and they track, but they're not identical. Because while inflation does drive pay increases, it's a big consideration in them. It's not the only consideration. So it's demand for talent, it's and it's how robust the economy is. So remember back in the 70s, there was this thing called stagflation. So we're not sure if we're going to have, you know, a pure recession, or are we going to go into a stagflationary period? And if it's stagflation, you know, you're not going to be able to have your merit increases keep up with inflation. There won't be the same demands to be able to allow that. I think there's a second part to this also, which is who experiences inflation the most. So and I think it's important for companies to consider this when they're looking at their salary increase budgets. is that there are roles that if they have to be at the workplace. So I think we have a tendency to be thinking about the office folks, but there's a whole healthcare and factories and a whole slew of people who must be at the workspace. So they have to commute in, and also a salary increase for them may not buy as many loaves of bread as it would for a more senior manager. So really think about where you're putting your dollars in terms of your merit increase budgets, and think about that for the inflation impact.
Yeah, no, I think that's a huge point, because we always think of inflation as being a number, be it 8% or 10% or 4%, whatever it is. We think of it as a number, but inflation is simply a basket of goods. That's how they are measured. And that basket of goods, how much of your income you personally spend on that varies wildly. And I actually saw a report, this was UK based, sorry for being a little bit local on this, but it said that actually, although the rate was 10%, some items which the poor people tend to consume the most of as a percentage of their salary, like, for example, pasta or cooking oil or tea or things, were running at 40 or 50% year-on-year inflation, whereas other items have fallen. I think in this survey I said orange juice for some reason fallen by 8% in the year. So, I've got no idea why. But what the point is that some things vary more than others. The other thing, of course, is that the wealthier you are, the more likely you are to save some of your salary. And the poorer you are, the more likely you are to spend every last dollar of your salary. So inflation tends to hit the people at the bottom end of the pay scale more than those at the top end. So it's a huge issue. I mean, do you think we're going to get to the time when actually we have more than one pay review a year? We have maybe a second inflation pay review in the same annual period.
Yes. Oh, sorry, Joe. I'll just throw in one quick comment that I've been recommending to our clients, that they budget a little bit on the higher side, and then because they have to budget now, and then do their merit, which is here around March, but check the market, see where you are, and if you don't need to spend it, great. Then wait until June or July or August and maybe do another update if needed. Sorry, Joe, go ahead.
No, I look, similar to those same concepts from a domestic point of view, right? We've been advising to circle back and look at COLA adjustments on international assignments. We do a lot of work with Air Inc., and we touch base with them. And I just had one the other day, and I think it was Luxembourg. And at one point there were COLA adjustments suggested, and we received a report, and it was, look, we're not, at least for right now, we're not suggesting a cost of living adjustment. You've got the strength of the U.S. dollar, you've got local economic conditions, and it's really gotten to the point where we're suggesting quarterly reviews. I mean, have a look and see what's happening, because things are changing.
Okay, just a reminder out there in the audience, we're going to be bringing Alex back on screen in about 2 minutes' time to do that draw. So if you haven't written GME Live EMEA in the comments box and you want to take part in the debate, you've got literally 120 seconds to enter. And as they say, you've got to be in it to win it. But let's just get on to our very last point. We've only got a couple of minutes about this, Judy and Joe. Exchange rates. We've seen a huge amount of volatility in exchange rates. How is that going to impact things like cost of living and COLA adjustments? Do you think we're going to see more frequent adjustments? I know from our perspective at Benevo, we are updating all our data more frequently now than we used to, simply because of the volatility that's going on, both in terms of inflation and exchange rates. But Joe, is that something that you're seeing when you're advising your clients?
I mean, it absolutely plays in, and it gets back to doing your reviews and doing them frequently, because the exchange rate that we had in mind from 6 months ago, whether it's US, UK, or US, Europe, may not look the same today. Some areas are obviously more volatile than others, but ever so more important to really do your upfront homework on this.
Okay, and do we think, one last question to you, Judy, putting your hat on, do you think we're going to be in recession next year?
So as an economics major, so the question is, are we in recession now?
I was going to hit you with that, Judy.
Yeah. I want some good news here. I think the only good news is going to be Alex pulling the name out of the hat in a moment.
Yeah, and the question is, are we going to be in stagflation as we move in? So I'm aging myself. They were definitely talking about that when I was getting my degree. That was, not that far before. So.
Okay, well let's hope not. We're going to bring Alex on now. So I'll bring Alex on. Here we go. And I'm just going to move you guys backstage for a moment. Joe and Judy. So Alex, how's it been going? You've been getting lots of requests from people. I've been busy looking at the screen, but you've been looking at LinkedIn.
We have. I've spent the last 45 minutes scribbling and cutting up bits of paper, so to place in the hat. But a great show, Brian, and remote work still is throwing up so many challenges. So it's great to hear some insights from the guys at BDO.
And I know you're going to be covering it in some of your events coming forward, along with, I know you've got loads of great sessions, and obviously I'm biased. There's a great session that Beth Nielsen from Benevo is going to be presenting, but I know there's lots of really good sessions there. I know your events have got a great reputation. So yeah, I'd like to encourage everybody to come along. So Alex, this is the moment. Drum roll.
Here we go. So we've got the hat. We had a good amount of entries actually. So and I'm going to pick completely at random. So are we saying, Brian, that they need to be still online now to claim their prize?
Yeah, let's have some fun. You've got to be still online. So everybody, if you're there and you want to take part, hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button. Let's know you're there. And then we're going to draw it. And then when we draw it, you've got to tell us you're still there. Otherwise, we'll draw somebody else. Okay, is everybody ready out there? Tell us. Okay, he's going for it. This is the moment. This is so exciting.
Here we go.
The hand has gone into that hat. Eyes shut, please. No cheating. Okay, here we go. And the name that has come out, drum roll, everybody, get ready, hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause. The name is
Amelia Poirier from Bombardier, who's based in Montreal.
Wow.
Amelia, are you still there?
Okay, Amelia, are you there? Let's see that. And if you are, we want to see that name on screen. We'll get the name on screen if you're there. Is Amelia from Bombardier still there? Is Amelia there? I haven't seen the comment coming up yet. Oh, this is a bit tense.
Yeah.
This is a bit tense.
10 more seconds.
10 more seconds. We'll give her another 10. Oh, no.
No. Well, should we go back to the hat?
Sorry, Amelia.
Back to the hat we go. So
okay,
we've got a chance to win.
Hang on, let's just check. No, hang on. Has anybody? No, just checking. No comments. Okay, we're going to try again.
Okay.
You've got to be there.
Okay, here we go. We've got Stephanie Kuhn from Walmart. Are you still there?
Is Stephanie from Walmart there? Are you still out there, or have you ducked out? Oh no, they've gone too. What's going on here? Maybe the comments aren't working. I'll have to give it to whoever is the first person to comment. I'm not seeing any comments come up, which is slightly worrying me here.
No. Shall we try once more?
We'll try once more, and if that doesn't work, we'll go back and we'll contact them, and we'll do them in the order that we said, and we'll offer it to them first. Okay,
yeah, sounds
so this is our third alternative. Let's hope they are there.
Okay, we've got Karen Hale from Unity Technologies.
Karen, are you with us? I know you were here. You were definitely here earlier. So I'm not seeing Karen coming through. This is very strange. One of them must be there. We'll give it a few moments. Whilst we do, I shall bring Julia and Pat and Judy and Joe and Tally back onto the screen.
Karen, was here in a few months ago.
Years ago, they went out. Oh no, Karen's here!
Yeah, she's here.
Congratulations. Karen, you are our lucky winner.
Yeah, well
Okay.
Well done.
So congratulations, Karen. The GME team will reach out to you very, very shortly and tell you all the details. And obviously, everyone's looking forward to seeing you in London. For everybody else, we are back next week with another show where we're going to be talking about the integrated relocation company model. It's going to be a fascinating show. So all good, everybody. And many, many thanks to our guests. We've had Alex with all the fun of the draw, and we wish you best for the conference. Julia and Pat, many, many thanks for your regular immigration and tax updates. We couldn't do this show with you. And Judy and Joe, many thanks for a really insightful hour. It's been just absolutely wonderful. We will be back next week. So till then, take care, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
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 Well done, Karen.